Elderly woman finds frozen. Canine German Shepherd puppy. After snowstorm. Then something heartbreaking happens. She was just an old woman living alone on the edge of town, used to the silence of winter and the weight of years. But that morning, after the fiercest snowstorm the town had seen in decades, she opened her back door and saw something she never expected. A tiny, motionless German Shepherd puppy half buried in the snow. He wasn't moving. He looked gone. But when she touched him, he blinked. What followed was a battle against time, memory, and heartbreak. Because saving the little canine wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something far more painful and beautiful. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The blizzard had roared through the town of Hollow Creek like a freight train in the dead of night. Power lines cracked under the weight of ice. Trees groaned and split in the wind. And snow buried the roads until every house stood like an island in a sea of white silence. For Eleanor Brooks, 78 and widowed, it was the kind of storm that reminded her of how small a person could feel against the cold. Her cabin sat on the far end of Pine Hollow Road, where the county plows rarely reached in time. She had firewood, canned food, and the ghosts of her past to keep her company. When she opened her back door that morning, wrapped in her wool cardigan and a scarf she'd knitted 30 winters ago, she wasn't expecting to find life waiting for her. At first, she thought it was a pile of branches blown in from the woods. But as she stepped closer, her heart jumped. It wasn't a branch. It was a puppy. A small German Shepherd pup, barely a few months old, lay motionless in the snow, its fur frozen stiff, its tiny body curled in on itself. Ice crusted over its ears and eyelashes. For a moment, Eleanor didn't breathe. Then she moved. She dropped to her knees in the snow, reached out with trembling fingers, and touched the pup's back. Cold. Far too cold. But it blinked. "Oh my God," she whispered, her breath fogging in the air. "You're alive." She wrapped the puppy in her shawl and carried him inside with the urgency of someone years younger. Inside, she placed him beside the wood stove, started a fresh fire, and gently rubbed his paws with a warm towel. His breathing was shallow. Barely there. But there. Eleanor didn't know where he'd come from. There were no paw prints leading to her door, only wind and ice. No barking, no whimpering. Just him, frozen, alone. She stayed by his side for hours, watching him like a fragile secret. Every tiny twitch of his ears, every flutter of breath, felt like a miracle. Eventually, he moved his head, tried to sit up. "Easy, baby," she murmured. "You've been through hell." When he looked at her, truly looked, something passed between them. His eyes were not the soft, blank eyes of a house pet. They were sharp, alert, trained. She knew that look. Her late husband, James, had worked with military dogs in the 70s. She remembered the way they'd sit, shoulders tense, ears erect, always listening for a command. This pup? He had that same intensity, even in weakness. "You're not just any pup, are you?" she whispered. As the day went on, she fed him warm broth by hand and massaged his legs gently. The color returned to his gums. He even let out a small bark, just once, but loud enough to make her heart leap. She decided to call him Ranger. That night, they slept side by side in the living room, the fireplace crackling softly. Eleanor barely closed her eyes. She didn't want to miss a single breath. But as the wind howled again outside, a question haunted her. Where had Ranger come from? The town was locked down. No one could have driven through the mountain roads during that storm, and no one had reported a missing dog on the emergency radio channels. And then there was the collar. It was plain black nylon, half buried under his thick fur, but embroidered into the edge were faint letters, faded by snow and ice. K9, do not pet. Her heart sank. This wasn't just a lost puppy. This was a K9 in training, and someone, somewhere, was missing him. Or worse, had left him behind. She sat in the dim light, gently stroking Ranger's head, a lump forming in her throat. The fire warmed the room, but she felt a chill deeper than anything the storm had brought. What had this little soldier seen? And why had fate brought him to her door? The next morning, she decided to find out. By the time the second morning came, Ranger was strong enough to stand on his own. Eleanor watched as he stretched his legs beside the fire, his back arched and tail low, like a soldier shaking off sleep. He limped slightly on one hind leg, but there was fight in him. Every movement said, "I'm not giving up." She smiled faintly. "You're a tough one." After feeding him another warm bowl of broth with bits of shredded chicken, Eleanor did what she hadn't done in months. She pulled on her snow boots, layered herself in coats, and stepped outside into the deep snow. The blizzard had calmed. A heavy silence hung over Hollow Creek, broken only by the occasional snap of ice falling from the trees. She trudged through knee-high drifts around the back of her cabin, determined to retrace Ranger's steps if there were any to be found. There were none. The snow had erased everything. She stood in the stillness, puzzled. There was no way a puppy, especially one that had nearly frozen, could have made it here on his own. Someone had to have left him. But why? She turned to head back and paused. Something dark was sticking out from beneath the snow beside the tree line. She moved closer, heart quickening. It was a black pouch, soaked and half frozen, barely visible under a sheet of ice. She dug it out with her gloved hands, carried it back inside, and carefully placed it on the kitchen table beside Ranger. He sniffed it immediately. Inside was a small identification folder, warped by water damage, and a metallic object wrapped in leather. Eleanor gasped when she unwrapped it. A badge, worn but unmistakable. United States K9 Unit, D.A.T.R. McAllister. She looked at Ranger, who was now standing alert, ears perked. "You belong to a cop." Her mind began to race. She shuffled through the folder, trying to read what she could. Most of the ink had bled, but one thing was clear. A photo of a young man with sharp eyes and a gentle smile. He couldn't have been more than 30. She turned the badge over and saw a handwritten number etched inside the leather. A phone number. Her hands shook as she dialed it on her old landline, praying the storm hadn't knocked out service entirely. The line rang, once, twice, click. A robotic voice. "This number is no longer in service." She hung up slowly, her breath unsteady. Something was wrong. Something didn't add up. If this McAllister was Ranger's handler, where was he? Why would his dog end up abandoned in the woods during a storm? And then a new fear crept into Eleanor's heart, one colder than any snow outside. What if Ranger hadn't been left behind? What if someone didn't want him found? That afternoon, Eleanor made a decision. She called Deputy Harris at the county sheriff's office, a man she trusted, who had known her since her husband's passing. He arrived in a pickup by dusk, boots crunching over ice as he stepped into her cabin. She handed him the badge, the pouch, and the torn folder. He studied it all in silence. "I know this guy," Harris said finally. "McAllister, transferred upstate 2 months ago to the K9 training facility. But I heard a rumor." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "What kind of rumor?" "He was discharged," Harris said, lowering his voice. "After a mission went bad. Rumors said he refused a direct order, protected his duck instead of finishing the op. Dog got injured. They blamed him. He disappeared after that." Her stomach twisted. Then what's his dog doing out here, in a storm like this? Harris looked down at Ranger, who sat quietly beside the fire, watching them both. "I don't know," he said. but something doesn't feel right." Eleanor nodded slowly. She didn't have a background in law enforcement. She was just an old woman who once loved a man in uniform, but she knew loyalty when she saw it. And this dog, this canine, had been through something no creature should endure. She wasn't going to let him vanish. "Can you help me find him?" she asked Harris, her voice steady. He nodded. "I'll try, but Eleanor, if someone dumped this dog out here on purpose, they might not want us digging." She looked down at Ranger and gently brushed the fur on his neck. "Then let them come." And for the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt that fire again. Not the one in the stove, but the one that had once made her fearless. She had something to protect. The next morning, the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was tense. Eleanor stood at her window, the sky outside still gray and heavy with snow clouds, though the worst of the storm had passed. Ranger lay near the fire, eyes half open, ears twitching at every creak in the cabin. He hadn't barked once, but Eleanor could feel it too. Something had changed. Deputy Harris had left the night before with the badge and the documents. He promised to run them through old databases, see what he could find about McAllister's sudden disappearance. Eleanor had offered him tea, but they both knew there wasn't time for it. He had looked uneasy when he stepped outside, like a man who didn't trust the dark anymore. She didn't either. By mid-morning, she bundled up and went outside with Ranger walking beside her, still limping slightly, but stronger with every step. He sniffed the air constantly, eyes sharp, body tense. He didn't walk like a pet. He moved like a soldier. As they rounded the corner of the cabin toward the edge of the woods, Eleanor's boot crunched down on something strange. Not snow. Ice that had been disturbed. She stepped back. Footprints. Human. Large. Deep enough to have been made overnight, and definitely after the snowfall. She looked toward the tree line. The prints led into the woods and vanished. Ranger growled low in his throat. Eleanor's pulse jumped. Someone had been here, watching. She returned inside quickly, bolted the door, and drew the curtains. Her hands trembled as she reached for the old wooden box James had kept under the floorboard. One that hadn't been opened in more than a decade. Inside was his pistol. Unregistered, dusty, but clean. He had taught her how to shoot when they were younger. Just in case, he'd said. She'd laughed at the time. She wasn't laughing now. She sat at the table with the pistol beside her, watching Ranger, who now paced the room in slow, tense circles. He wasn't relaxed anymore. He was alert. Something had stirred his instincts, and Eleanor trusted those more than her own. By early afternoon, the phone rang. It was Harris. "I found something," he said. McAllister never officially transferred to another unit. His K9, call sign Echo, was reported dead in the field 2 months ago. Explosion during a drug raid. But that doesn't match what we have. Your dog isn't dead. He's Echo. Eleanor blinked. So, he survived. But they said he didn't. Exactly. I don't think McAllister abandoned him. I think someone wanted them both gone. Eleanor's breath caught. Why? I don't know yet, Harris said. But I pulled one more thing. McAllister filed an internal report 2 days before he disappeared. He accused his own commanding officer of staging an illegal raid to cover up missing evidence. That report disappeared too. Eleanor closed her eyes. Now it made sense. Echo Ranger had seen something, survived something, and someone didn't want that truth coming to light. That night, the wind returned. Not as fierce as before, but colder somehow, sharper. Eleanor sat in the dark, the fire low. Ranger curled at her feet. She held James's pistol in her lap, feeling the weight of it, the weight of responsibility. Then, just after midnight, she heard it. A branch snapping outside. Ranger was up instantly, growling now, ears forward, muscles taut. Another sound, a slow, deliberate crunch of boots on snow. Closer. She rose and moved to the window, peeking through the edge of the curtain. A dark figure was walking around the side of the cabin. Not fast, not stumbling. Looking. Searching. She felt her throat tighten. Whoever it was, they weren't lost. They were hunting. And they had come for the dog. Ranger stepped in front of the door, growling louder now. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She locked the back door, turned off the lights, and whispered to him, "Stay with me." The dog didn't move from his position. But outside, a new pair of footprints began forming in the snow, leading straight to her door. The knock came at 12:43 a.m. Not loud, not frantic, just patient. Eleanor stood frozen near the wood stove, her hand gripping the pistol so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ranger stood between her and the door, tail stiff, his deep growl rumbling low like distant thunder. A second knock. Slower this time. She didn't breathe. Then a voice, low, male, rough from the cold, called out, "Mrs. Brooks, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want the dog." Her blood turned to ice. No name, no badge, just the dog. She edged toward the door slowly, voice trembling but firm. "You've got the wrong house." There was a pause. "I know what's inside that cabin. I know who he is. You don't know what you're protecting." "I know enough." "Then you know he's dangerous." She clenched her jaw. "He's not." Silence. And then, "This isn't your fight." But it was now. Eleanor had lost a husband to war. She had buried friends, outlived siblings, endured winters so cruel they turned the trees brittle. She wasn't going to be scared off by a voice in the dark. She leaned close to the door. "Leave, before I make this my fight." Another pause. Then footsteps. Fading. She stayed still for a full minute, waiting for the sound of retreating boots. But it never came. She rushed to the window and saw the movement. Just a shadow, disappearing into the tree line. He wasn't gone, just regrouping. Ranger growled again and stood by the window, his ears perked. Eleanor turned off the last of the lamps and moved to the cabinet by the door, retrieving a flashlight and her husband's old military radio. Static filled the room until she found the emergency frequency Harris had given her. "Hollow Creek Unit 5, she whispered. "This is Eleanor Brooks. I've got someone outside the property. I need help." There was static. Then, "Copy that, Eleanor. Stay inside. I'm 20 minutes out." She exhaled and clicked the radio off. 20 minutes. It might as well be 20 years. She looked at Ranger. "We hold tight." He didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on the front window. She stepped into the hallway, pistol in hand, her breath quiet, controlled. She had lived through a lot in 78 years, but never had she felt her heart thundering like this. Not even the day she got the call that James had passed. This was different. This was present. And then, glass shattered. A small pane in the back laundry room. Ranger barked, a single sharp explosion of sound, and bolted toward the hallway. Eleanor followed, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. The back room was dark, snow blowing through the broken glass. A boot was already through the window. Without thinking, Eleanor raised the pistol. "Don't!" The man froze, half inside, one knee, on the windowsill. His face was hidden beneath a black wool mask, but his eyes were wild, desperate. "I said, don't!" He didn't, Muffy, but Ranger did. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged, grabbing the man's arm in his jaws, pulling him halfway into the house. The man screamed, struggling against the grip. Eleanor stepped back, heart racing. "Let him go," she commanded, voice steady. To her shock, Ranger obeyed. The man yanked himself free, fell backward out the window, and scrambled into the night, blood trailing in the snow. Ranger didn't follow. He turned to Eleanor, tail wagging slowly, almost as if asking, "Did I do good?" She knelt beside him, heart still pounding, and placed her hand on his back. "You did perfect." 5 minutes later, Harris arrived in a flurry of snow and headlights. Eleanor opened the door before he knocked. She didn't need to explain. The blood in the snow, the broken window, the shredded mask caught in the glass, it all told the story. "They know where he is now," Harris said grimly, looking down at Ranger. "And they're not going to stop." Eleanor nodded. "Then we move first." He raised an eyebrow. "I thought you wanted peace." She looked down at Ranger, who stood proudly at her side, his seams glowing silver in the moonlight. "I want the truth, and he deserves to know who left him to die." Outside, the wind picked up again, but inside something had changed. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a mission. The next morning, Harris returned with a file folder sealed in a clear plastic bag. His eyes were tired, his uniform dusted with snow, but his voice was firm as he handed the bag to Eleanor on her porch. "This is what they didn't want found." Eleanor took it carefully, her hands steady. Inside was a report, real paper, not digital, and a series of photocopied statements. She stepped inside with Harris and Ranger, who hadn't left her side since the attack. She laid the folder on the table, flipping it open with quiet intensity. The name on the report: Detective Ryan McAllister. Accusation: falsification of mission orders, abuse of K9 protocol, and refusal to execute a direct command during an armed operation. But under that, clipped to the back, was a handwritten statement, McAllister's own. Harris pointed to it. "This is what never made it into official records." Eleanor read aloud. "Operation Winter Gate was altered in the field. I was ordered to send my K9 ahead into a building rigged with explosives without warning. I refused. I knew Echo wouldn't come back. I went in instead. I found marked cash, drugs, and a listening device already running. Someone was recording us. My partner was gone. Echo was wounded. I believe this was a cover-up, not a sting. If something happens to me, the dog knows." He saw them. Eleanor's throat tightened. "They tried to use the dog to destroy evidence." "And when he survived," Harris added, "he became the only witness." They sat in silence as Ranger rested his head on Eleanor's foot, his eyes flickering with recognition every time the word Echo was spoken. "What about McAllister?" Eleanor asked softly. Harris's jaw tensed. "That's the hard part." He pulled another paper from his coat. An incident report dated 3 weeks ago. Body found in a river 2 counties north. No ID. Burned fingertips. No wallet. But the height and scars match. I sent a copy of this to a retired handler who trained McAllister's unit. And? Harris exhaled. He says it's him. Eleanor turned away, blinking fast. So he's gone. Harris nodded. But I don't think he died by accident. I think when they realized he kept the originals of his report, on paper, not digital, they took him out. Eleanor stared at the fire, mind racing. McAllister had known his tech could be wiped. He trusted paper. He trusted Echo. And he was right. The only problem was, now Echo had no one. Until now. Eleanor looked down at the dog. He looked back at her with those intelligent, haunted eyes. She knelt, cupped his face in her hands. You're not just a survivor, she whispered. You're the last piece of his truth. Ranger licked her hand gently, and in that moment, she felt something shift between them, a silent understanding. "We can't keep this quiet," Harris said. "But if we release it without protection, they'll spin it. Say McAllister went rogue. Say Echo was unstable." Eleanor stood, stronger than she had felt in years. "Then we do it smart." She walked to the desk and pulled out her old photo albums. From one sleeve, she removed a contact list James had written years ago. Retired military journalists, friends in public affairs, people who once fought to make the truth known. "I'll make a few calls," she said. "You call in someone who's not on anyone's payroll, someone who won't fold." Harris grinned, a spark of admiration in his eyes. "You sure you're ready for this?" She looked toward Ranger. He was ready the moment they left him to die. That night, Eleanor scanned and emailed every document to a secure inbox a retired investigative reporter had given her years ago. She attached a message. "If you're reading this, it means someone tried to bury a good man and his dog. Don't let them." Then she clicked send. A storm far greater than the one outside had just been set in motion. But this time, Eleanor wasn't afraid of the cold. She was ready to burn the lies down. It started with a voicemail. Eleanor checked her phone the morning after sending the documents, expecting silence, but instead, there was a single message from a private number. A gruff male voice spoke quickly. "We got it. Verified McAllister's statement. We're going public at midnight. But be careful, ma'am. If this was buried once, someone will try to bury it again. Watch your back." She stood frozen in the kitchen, phone in hand, while Ranger lay at her feet, eyes locked on the door like he already knew what was coming. The news broke later that night. It wasn't mainstream, not yet, but it hit cheesed on smaller outlets. Former K-9 officer accused of disobeying orders may have been silenced. Dog missing. Evidence emerges. Photos of McAllister. Mentions of a retired German Shepherd named Echo. Speculation. Leaks. Whispers. The truth was moving, and so were the people who wanted it dead. By the next morning, Harris called with urgency in his voice. "They're coming, Eleanor. I heard chatter on the encrypted radios. Someone's already heading to Hollow Creek." Maybe 2 men, maybe more. They're not wearing badges, and they're not coming to talk. Eleanor didn't flinch. Let them come. But inside, her mind was racing. She couldn't let them take Echo, not now. Not when the world was just beginning to see what had been done. Not when McAllister's name might finally be cleared. She looked at them all, at Ranger, at Echo. He stood tall now, his body stronger, his spirit steady. "You are ready, soldier?" she whispered. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back with fierce, loyal eyes. That evening, she packed only what mattered: the original documents in a weatherproof folder, Ranger's bowl, the old military radio, and a flash drive Harris had given her with backup files. They couldn't stay at the cabin. She'd survived winters, grief, and age. But this would be different. This wasn't about survival. This was about protection. Harris arrived just after sunset in an unmarked SUV. No lights, no sirens. Just headlights off and engine quiet. Eleanor was already waiting by the door, Echo at her side, tail still, alert. "You good to ride?" Harris asked. "I've survived worse than a few crooked cowards," she answered, her coat zipped up tight, her late husband's pistol now holstered inside it. They left the cabin without turning back. 20 minutes down the snowy road, headlights appeared behind them. Too fast. Too close. Harris cursed under his breath and gripped the wheel tighter. "Company," he muttered. Echo turned in the back seat, growling low. The SUV behind them sped up. Harris tapped his radio. "Unit 5 requesting backup on Hollow Creek Access Road, 2 miles south of Fork Ridge. Pursuit confirmed." No answer. Just static. "They're jamming us," he said. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She pulled the flash drive from her pocket. Then we make sure this doesn't die with us. She handed it to him. You get this out no matter what. Then she reached back and gently touched Echo's neck. If anything happens, you run. The SUV behind them rammed their bumper. Once, then twice. Harris turned the wheel sharply, trying to keep control as snow and ice sprayed across the road. The tires skidded. Eleanor gripped the handle. Echo braced his paws. Then, a voice crackled on the radio. Not Harris's frequency, a man's voice. Give us the dog, or we take the truck with everything in it. Harris slammed the brakes. The SUV behind them overshot, spinning off into the embankment. They didn't wait to see if it stopped. Harris gunned it forward again. I know a place, he said. Old ranger station. No power, but it's high ground. If we hold out till sunrise, help might reach us. They drove in silence for 10 more minutes. The air was sharp, the tension thicker than fog. When they finally stopped, the station appeared like a ghost, weather-worn, isolated, and half covered in snow. Inside, Eleanor set up the small wood stove, while Harris blocked the door with old furniture. Echo lay by the window, watching the forest below, every sense alive. Do you think they'll follow us? Eleanor asked. They already are, Harris replied. She nodded, then looked down at Echo. You've been running long enough, haven't you? The dog looked up at her, and for the first time since she found him half dead in the snow, he wagged his tail. A single, slow wag. Eleanor smiled. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Because Echo was more than just a witness. He was the voice of the man who never gave up on him, and now it was her turn to fight. Dawn broke cold and silent over the ranger station. Frost clung to the windows like breath held too long. Inside, Eleanor sat wrapped in a wool blanket, one hand gently resting on Echo's back. He hadn't moved from his post by the window all night, watching, listening, waiting. Outside, the woods were still. No headlights, no shadows, just snow and sky and the eerie hush that came after surviving something too close. Harris stirred first, wiping sleep from his eyes and reaching for the radio. Unit 5 to dispatch. Hollow Creek Outpost secured. No pursuit since 0400. Request confirmation of media drop and pickup ETA. This time, there was a reply. Static cleared, followed by a calm female voice. Copy that, Unit 5. Media outlet received the full report at 0600. National broadcast planned for noon. Helicopter en route to your location. 30 minutes out. Hold position. Eleanor closed her eyes. It was finally happening. The truth about Detective Ryan McAllister, the betrayal, the cover-up, the orders he refused to follow because he wouldn't sacrifice the one partner who never left his side. All of it, now in the hands of the world. And the dog who carried his legacy was still here, alive, strong, watching over the people who refused to give up on him. 30 minutes passed slowly, every second stretching like a heartbeat. Then came the distant sound of rotors slicing the cold air. The chopper rose above the treetops, its searchlight scanning the clearing. Harris stepped outside first, waving with a bright orange tarp. Two figures disembarked from the helicopter, one in tactical gear, one holding a camera. The world was watching now. Eleanor followed with Echo walking beside her, calm and proud. His fur shimmered in the early light. His eyes never left the tree line. Even now he stayed alert, not for himself, but for them. The camera operator turned to Eleanor, wide-eyed. Is that the dog? The real Echo? She nodded. The journalist, a woman with gray-streaked hair and fire in her eyes, stepped forward gently. You saved him. No, Eleanor said. He saved himself. I just gave him a place to rest. The team took Echo's photo, filmed the ranger station, captured Eleanor's voice as she told the story. Not like a rehearsed speech, but like memory etched into her bones. They showed the badge, the field report, and the frozen pup she found half dead in the snow, whose name the world now whispered with reverence. By nightfall, the story aired on national television. Corrupt canine raid exposed. Disgraced detective proven innocent posthumously. Hero. Dog survives ordeal. Eleanor watched the broadcast in Harris's cabin that evening. The camera zoomed in on Echo's eyes, still watchful, still wise, and then faded to a photo of McAllister smiling with him years earlier. And the headline beneath it, his name was Echo, and he never forgot. She wiped a tear from her cheek, not from sadness, but release. The next day, the calls came in. Veterans groups, canine rescue organizations, news outlets, all offering tributes, donations, even adoption proposals. But Eleanor already knew the answer. Echo stayed, not because he was hers, but because she was his. They returned to the cabin 2 days later. The snow had melted just enough to reveal the trail behind the house. Eleanor planted a small wooden cross near the tree line, right where she'd first found him. At the base, she carved, "For the ones who are left behind, but never forgotten." Echo sat beside it. He didn't whine, didn't bark. He simply placed his paw on the wood like he understood, and maybe he did. That night, as they curled up beside the fire, Eleanor whispered softly to the dog lying at her feet, "You were meant for battle, but now, you're home." He blinked slowly, eyes closing. For the first time, he truly rested. No commands, no fear, no more running, just peace. And in that moment, Eleanor knew she hadn't just saved a canine, she had found something she thought life had already taken from her. Purpose. If this story inspired you, remember, courage and loyalty can overcome any storm. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Echo's journey proves that even after the coldest nights, the sun still rises.